And when it comes to choosing a takeoff spot, you want to choose somewhere that's relatively clean and free. So in this case, I'm going to put it right there. The reason I'm choosing that is that it won't go ahead and hit the grass. So if I put it over here like this, the props will hit the grass and it might stop it. Also, don't put it on any sort of metal surface like the top of a car, for example, or a sewer grate. That will go ahead and interfere with the compass inside of it, and it'll probably throw an error message, but it'll also might confuse it and screw it up for later on in flight. Next, you'll see on the roll controller right now that it offers me to do a beginner flight tutorial. I'd recommend doing that. In this case though, I'm going to skip that because I'm going to basically do it for you. Go confirm, ignore that. And now you can see what the drone itself is showing. The very first thing I want to do though is to double check a couple parameters. So go ahead and choose the ... at the top. So this little option right up here in the corner there. And now validate that obstacle avoidance is enabled. In my case, I have it set for bypass. Brake means that instead of going around something, it's just going to simply stop outright. That's something we can talk about later on. Next, if we slide on down in the options here, I always validate that the max distance and the max altitude are set. The max altitude is something that you want to validate. It's not going to go above that. In most countries, you're looking at about 400 feet or about 120 meters or so. So that's what I set it for there from like a regulatory standpoint. And max distance can again depend on your country, but in my case, I'm mostly doing it so if the aircraft goes somewhere it shouldn't, I know I can at least find it. So it's about 1,500 meters away. And then also you can set your automatic return to home altitude. That's the auto RTH you see right there. Return to home means that if it loses connection with the controller or something happens where it can't connect to you anymore, it'll automatically return to this exact same spot. In this case, I want to do that relatively high, about 100 meters. That way it's going to avoid anything along its path, and 100 meters around here means it's going to basically avoid, well, pretty much everything. Next thing you want to do, especially absolutely if this is your first flight with this drone, is ensure the firmware is updated. It should have prompted you by now to do this, but you tap the About button right there and go down there under Aircraft Firmware and just do check for updates. And that'll go ahead and check and make sure there's no updates available. That's super important on DJI drones because they will be made months ago at this point, and that firmware won't even have half the features I'm talking about. Like it literally will not have things like 4K 60, all the quick shot modes, those will be missing. So you definitely want to ensure that your firmware is updated to at least the level you see right there before you get started. Finally, validate up in the corner there that you've got a full battery, so you see 96% right there. You see that the RC status has full signal, and you see right next to that the obstacle avoidance is enabled. There's no red. You're just basically looking for no red in the top of your controller. You see I've got 30 satellites available right now, which is incredible. And then when I first power it on, it'll say home point updated.
The home point has been updated.
Once it has about 12 satellites. Do not take off before it says home point updated or that has all of its satellites. If you do, it will not be able to find its way back to here. And additionally, if you take off before all the satellites, it won't necessarily be very stable in flight.